lot of what I'm going to say, it's basically been covered this morning, so I'll go through it pretty quickly. So I'm the portfolio manager at the National Institute of Aging, and this is just one of the institutes that's housed under the National Institutes of Health. And so what we focus our research on is mainly aging longevity and Alzheimer's disease and related dementias. So I'm sure you've heard of SBIR and STTR programs already. About 3.2% goes towards SBIR, 0.45% goes towards STTR. They are congressionally mandated programs. And so at the NIA, we have a portfolio of about $143 million. That's what we closed fiscal year 22 in. And this year, it's estimated to be at about $150 million. And this is purely in non-dilutive funding. So this slide basically just covers the same thing I said, and you can see kind of what our budget allocation has been for fiscal year 22 and which institutes get the most funding. The first most funded institute at the NIH is NCI, and then we have NIAID, followed by us, NIA. And just to know kind of how big this budget is, back in 2015, our grant portfolio budget was only about $35 million, and now, as I mentioned, we're up to 150. So there's been a huge jump when it comes to Alzheimer's disease and small business funding. Same thing. So, again, probably covered this morning, but why seek SBIR funding? Just want to cover it one more time because it is very important that early stage companies know that there's not just venture capital funding out there. There are free, non-dilutive funding mechanisms over in the government. It's not a loan, no repayment is required. We don't take any impact on your equity. Eligibility, you have to be a US-based company, 500 or fewer employees. Been covered already, I'm sure. And so some critical differences when it comes to SBIR versus STTR. The SBIR programs, they permit research institution partners, while STTR actually mandates that you have to have a research university partner. There are some differences when it comes to outsourcing for subcontracts. Small business can only outsource about 33% of phase 1 activities for an SBIR and about 50% of phase 2 activities. For STTR, a minimum has to be 40% at the small business, and the research institution has to cover about 30%. For eligibility for the PI, primary has to be at the small business for SBIR, and for STTR, the PI has to be, it's not stipulated, but about 10% of effort on the project. And so phase-wise, and don't confuse these with clinical trial phases. Phase 1 is really for discovery, feasibility, proof of concept, target identification studies, and these are about 6 months to a year. For general aging, they are $300,000, and for AD and ADRD specifically, these go up to $500,000. Phase 2 is kind of scaling up and building upon your phase 1. It's more full R&D. These are typically 2 years in length, and for general awards, they're $2 million, and for AD focus, they're $2.5 million. We also have something called a fast track application, which is your phase 1 and your phase 2 combined together. And so the main difference here is that if you are going to apply through the fast track, you have to include a commercialization plan in your application, whereas if you were just applying for your phase 1, you don't really have to have that parsed out yet. And so the advantage of the fast track is since you are getting your phase 1 and your phase 2 award together, as soon as you're done your phase 1 and you reach your milestones, you can automatically just transition to your phase 2 without having to go through the whole application process again and the whole peer review process again. And then after your phase 1 and phase 2, we have something called a phase 2B and a CRP. So the phase 2B is kind of a continuation of your phase 2. And this is up to 3 years, and it awards up to $3 million. The CRP is called the Commercialization Readiness Pilot, and this is something that you can apply for while you're doing your phase 2. The phase 2B you have to have done after your phase 2. But your CRP you can do during your phase 2, and this is really to cover costs that a regular phase 1 and phase 2 doesn't actually cover. It's really when you're done your full R&D and you're really ready to get your target or your whatever you're working on into the market. We also have something called a direct to phase 2. So if you already have phase 1 feasibility studies done and you already have all that data and information, you don't really need to conduct a phase 1, so you can come in directly as a phase 2. Just some specifics about the budget. Don't forget that there is a 7% SBIR profit fee. This is something that goes completely to your business. If you don't take it in your budget originally, you cannot retroactively take it. So don't forget that. So NIH does fund via the omnibus solicitation. We have at NIA, we have one that's specifically for AD and ADRD that offers these higher budget limits. There are 3 receipt deadlines. January 5th is one that we actually just covered. The next one is April 5th and September 5th. I mentioned that we have our targeted solicitations as well through the AD omnibus, and then we also do, we actually just launched this last year, we also do contracts. Already covered this. So, time to award. When you apply, probably within about 2 to 3 months, we'll have a very good idea of whether you're going to be funded or not. So you're going to go through the peer review process, you're going to get a score, and then it's going to come to our division, me specifically. And I'll know within, if you scored well, the top 80% will have a very good idea. But if you scored within kind of the bottom 20%, this is where it might take a little bit longer to find out. But if you email us within 3 months, we should have a good idea. And you are going to get a summary statement, which includes all the reviewer comments. It touches on the strengths and the weaknesses of your application, and you can really use that and tailor it so that when you are resubmitting, if you choose to do so, you have a better, stronger application. And I would highly recommend that you take that summary statement and discuss it with who your program officer is going to be so that you can tailor it. But from application to time of award, I would say it takes about 6 to 9 months. And again, this is on the original application. Our success rates right now at NIA are about 11% for your original application. So I would say if you don't get it on your first try, please do try again. Resubmission rates are much higher. So a little bit about what our office specifically does. So again, I work for the Office of Strategic Extramural Programs. And so we are the central coordination at NIA for all SBIR and STTR awards. In addition to funding, we provide guidance to potential applicants. We do outreach such as this one. We go all over the nation and try to, talk about the SBIR programs and the resources that we have to offer. We provide entrepreneurship. We have 2 EIRs, and I'll get to them a little bit later. But we offer more than just funding. We have a lot of resources available for new entrepreneurs to really help them kind of get out of the lab and commercialize their product. So kind of just an overview, the head of our office, Todd Heim, our deputy director, Shoshana, and then everybody else. So NIA is made up of 4 different divisions. And when you apply, your application will be set to either one of these divisions, and your program officer will come from one of these divisions. However, it will come to us, since we manage all the SBIR awards. We have the Division of Aging Biology, we have the Division of Behavioral and Social Research, Division of Geriatrics and Clinical Gerontology, and the Division of Neuroscience. So we don't just fund one area of research. We fund a whole range of things. We have treatments. Therapeutics only make up about 32% of our portfolio, as you can see. And we have sensors and monitoring technologies, diagnostics, we do digital mobile health, and the list goes on. So if you have anything that's related to aging longevity or AD and ADRD, come talk to us. Just some statistics, but not really important. So the way that the funding opportunities that we do have, as I mentioned, we have our omnibus solicitations, and these are just the numbers right here that you can look up. We also have our AD-focused omnibus, which have higher budget limits. The CRP, as I mentioned, there's a small cap CRP. There are 2 other CRPs. One has a clinical trial allowed, one does not. And we also have something called the READY program, which is our Research and Entrepreneurial Development Immersion. And so the whole point of this, and we started this, I think, about 2 years ago, is we were finding that a lot of people who are coming out of the lab aren't really staying in academia. They're coming out of the lab, they're coming out of being a postdoc, and they want to transition into entrepreneurship, but they don't really know how. And so we funded a couple of mechanisms that actually take this person and really train them on entrepreneurship and kind of all the things you need to know about how to commercialize a product, how to develop a product. We also have something called TABA, and this is Technical and Business Assistance. And all SBIR and STTR awardees are eligible. So in your budget, on the other direct costs line, you would request this as TABA costs. And for phase 1, it's up to $6,500 a year, and for phase 2, it's $50,000. And the whole point of this is really to kind of get a overall assessment of the market and see what the technical risks are and how to develop and commercialize new products in the process. I mentioned the CRP program already. We also have something called the Diversity Supplement Program. And so this is only eligible for active SBIR and STTR awardees. This is something that kind of, after you get your award, if you have a candidate in mind who's maybe a student in your lab or a student in your company, and they really kind of have a goal of research and entrepreneurship, you guys can use these funds to kind of kickstart their career trajectory. And so funding comes up to about $100,000, $150,000. It can't go more than what your original parent award was for. Applications come in on a rolling basis. There are going to be a lot of other details that go into this. This is kind of just a general overview. But if you're interested and you have any actual questions about this, I'm the primary contact for it, so just let me know. As I mentioned, we are more than just funding. We do help and have other opportunities for entrepreneurs. One thing that we have is called the Applicant Assistance Program, and I'll get into a bit more detail on this later. We also have 2 EIRs, Entrepreneurs in Residence, that actually help our active portfolio companies kind of develop their pitch deck and show them how to put a PowerPoint together, the things that you need to actually cover when you're pitching to investors, and kind of they train them on those types of things. So the AAP program. So this is something that not only NIA participates in, but also all the participating ICs that you see up here. And it's kind of a course and kind of boot camp for first-time applicants. You can't have received any NIH funding in the past before in order to be eligible. And this kind of walks you through all the components of your application. And so by the end of it, what you have is kind of your phase 1 application put together already. We also have something called C3I, and this is specifically for medical device innovators. And this is kind of the same thing. It's a 24-week coaching program, putting them through kind of, how to write the grant application, what to focus on, but again, specifically just for medical device innovators. We also have I-Core at NIH. I believe this was also covered this morning. There are a lot of eligible institutes that participate in this. For eligibility, you have to be a phase 1 SBIR or STTR awardee, and they really kind of offer a hands-on training and customer discovery and life sciences and tech kind of entrepreneurship courses. These are our 2 EIRs that I mentioned, kind of, train and help our portfolio companies with their pitches and how to talk to investors. We also developed an entrepreneur workshop series where we have webinars and we do these recordings in kind of all stages, and they are also up on our website. We also have kind of the center at NIH for small business, which is called SEED. I believe they actually pitched this morning. So they're really kind of the main hub, I would say, coordinator at NIH for the innovator community for small business. We also pay for some of our current awardees to go to different conferences and actually showcase their technologies. So if you do become one of our active awardees, talk to us about attending these conferences and having kind of a booth, and we pay for that. Covered that already? Okay, so Startup Challenge. This is actually something that we're really excited. We started this last year. And so basically, this is a startup challenge at boot camp to really foster diversity and acceleration in innovation. It's an entrepreneurial boot camp. We offer one-on-one mentorship. And so out of I think we got about 260 applications last year, we picked 20 of the most promising companies, and we put them through this boot camp. And we actually, this year, we had it kind of done, our entrepreneur boot camp with the Resi. And so they were actually able to attend the Resi conference the next day and talk to innovators and kind of used what we taught them the day before to actually pitch to investors. And so out of these 20 finalists, we are going to pick about 5 and give them a $60,000 cash prize. And one of them is actually here today. We have Suma. And this just covers a couple of our participants so far. So a couple of tips for a successful application. So when not to apply. So if you need cash really urgently, I wouldn't recommend you apply for seed funding. The application process is really daunting. It's gonna take, we say that it's free money, but at the same time, it's not really free. It does require a lot of your time. So I mentioned you're gonna need a specific aims page. And so this is kind of really the nuts and bolts of what your application and what your technology is going to cover. I recommend that this is the first thing that you do. Develop your specific aims page, send it to us, our office. We will then review it, talk about policy with you and guidance on kind of what the application process is. We will send you this PowerPoint, and we will connect you to who your appropriate program officer in the divisions that I mentioned would be. And they can talk to you and kind of talk more about the science of what your technology is and better put you through the application process. But really important to mention that we are here to help you. So please don't just cold apply to any of these solicitations. Talk to us many times before you apply. We have a database called NIH Reporter, and this is a publicly available database, and it's available to anybody who kind of wants to go in. You can put in any of the institutes. You can filter by any of the institutes at NIH, put in a couple of keywords of what your technology is, and you can see everything that we've funded in that space. And you can read the abstracts and kind of see how they develop their projects and get an idea of what types of things we're funding. We also have sample applications on our website. So you can go in and see, you know, these are our successfully funded companies. You can see kind of what an SBIR, an STTR phase 2 application looked like. You can see the full application. You can see the summary statement that came from that application to see kind of what the weaknesses and strengths were, and really use it as kind of a guide to develop your own application. The application is done through the SF424. Again, not going to get into the nitty-gritty of it, but it is very involved. You are going to get if you apply to the omnibus, the institute is going to be selected for you. But what you can do is you can also select a secondary institute on your application. So for example, if you have something that would be maybe kind of related to NIA, but also maybe NIAMS or NINDS, because there is a lot of overlap with us and the Neurological Institute, you can request that we get submitted as a secondary or they get submitted as a secondary. And the benefit of that is, let's say, for example, you submit to us, we really like your application, but we just don't have the budget to cover it. We can kick it off to the secondary institute, and then they can cover it if they like it. But if you don't have a secondary institute listed, we can't do that. So this is just a way that you can increase your chances of getting funded. Would highly recommend that you start early. There are going to be a lot of registrations that your company has to get through. They're going to take about 2 to 3 months, and you can't actually have an NOA in hand until you have these applications and all these registrations set up. Just one thing to focus on, these are SBIR and STTR grants. They are small business grants. They are not research grants. So there is a vast difference between them. Small business grants really focus on the product, whereas an academic research grant focuses on the science. So keep in mind product. What is the commercialization potential of your technology? Keep all that in mind. The review criteria that the peer review is going to cover is going to be significance, the approach, the innovation, what's the competitive advantage, the investigators, the team, obviously, the environment, and again, as I mentioned, the most important piece, the commercialization. This is going to be very, very heavily scrutinized during peer review, whereas for a regular research grant, it is not. Just really have a vision. Be very clear in what you want to do, clear in how you want to commercialize it, what the study design is going to be, what the experience of the team is, what the insights are, all those things that I covered that are going to be really important to peer review. Basically what I just said, build the right team, draft a clear application, mention your specific aims, send that over to us. We can provide very good feedback. A research strategy is one of the points of your application as well. Kind of builds on the specific aims page. Make sure that is very detailed. Other components that can help your application would be letters of support. If you guys have a product and you already have kind of venture funding interest, if you have anybody else that would be interested, maybe licensing it, get letters of support from them. Before you submit it, highly recommend that you take everything that I mentioned that's going to be important to peer review and kind of peer review your application yourself. Use this as something that you would actually talk to your program officer about as well. Review policies, review the FOA in detail. Whatever FOA, or if you're applying through the omnibus or whatever PAR that you're applying through, make sure you read that in detail, many times. So I mentioned peer review already. Once you apply, as I mentioned, you will have about 2 to 3 months where we'll have a good idea if you'll be funded. If you are going to be funded and we kick that over to our grants department, you will get something called a just-in-time. And this kind of kicks it to the administrative process of grants, and they'll send you this just-in-time, and you're going to have to submit a little bit more information. But if you get this just-in-time, it's a very good likelihood that you're going to be funded, although it's not guaranteed. If you're not funded on the first try, please don't get disheartened. Apply again. Our success rates for first-time applicants are about 11–12% right now, but resubmission funding is much higher. So take that summary statement, tailor it, talk with it with your PO, and form a much better application and resubmit. So again, these are just kind of some of the things that I highlighted, some resources that you can go to, and how you can connect with us. And that's about it. So if you have any questions, I will take them at this time.
So one of the things we've come across is that in the biotech side, animal studies and clinical studies happen a lot earlier, but in the med device side, it can often be kind of later in the development cycle before that work is being done. Mm-hmm. Can you speak a little bit to, is there a certain point in a company's life where it's too early or it's too late, or kind of how do you look at that relative to the startup?
Well, I mean, it depends on what stage your research is really in. If you have validation studies, if you have your proof of concept done, I would say that's more focused towards a phase 2. So kind of, it really depends on where you are in your research and where you are kind of on product development. And so again, that's something that's why I would say develop your specific aim page to tell us exactly where you are. And it's better than just talking. So if we have it on paper, we can really review it and really try to figure out where you are in your research and better advise you on what phase you should actually come in on.
Thank you.
Thank you for this presentation. I had a question on your allocation. There was allocations for devices and treatments. Mm. Are there any trends or guidelines that you have internally that you're trying to do for digital health, or you know, is that pie shape moving around?
So it's been the pie shape. Just want to note that that pie shape is not what we're allocated for funding. So our funding, our entire funding is $143 million last year. 76% of those funds were specifically for AD and ADRD research, not allocated for, you know, this much money is allocated for therapeutics, this much money is for diagnostics. That's just kind of the pie of what our active portfolio consisted of. But we are seeing more of a pickup in diagnostics. And for therapeutics, we're seeing more of a pickup when it comes to different targets. So like amyloid-directed therapies are kind of taking a fall. They used to be 35%, and now they're like less than 10% of our portfolio. Tau-directed therapies, growth factors, those are kind of having an uptake as well. But there's nothing, I can't say specifically, you know, what's increasing or what's decreasing, but we fund everything really.
So it's just driven by how you approve it, not you don't have any mandates to...
No mandates on the different sectors. Just, the only mandate is AD versus our general aging longevity fund.
Thank you.
Yeah, great presentation, by the way. One question that I have is, the time for funding, as you mentioned, could be between 6 to 12 months. Mm-hmm. And what if, while we submit the application, can we, or should we continue doing our work on our own while we wait for the application disbursement? Because 12 months is a long time, and we can make significant progress or complete certain stages of product development during that time.
Keep working. Before you get your application, so if you conduct work before you actually get your NOA, from the start date of that NOA and 3 months prior, you can actually submit for reimbursement. So anything you did in that first 3 months before you got your project start date can be reimbursed.
Sorry, so let's say if the funding happened on 1st of January, then we could submit the expense or the cost 3 months prior to
3 months
that.
prior,
Okay,
yeah.
got it.
Maybe just extending on that a little bit more. If you have a diversity supplement, when do you begin applying? When you first get a good review and you think you might get funded, can you recruit a person and they would be?
You have to have an active award in hand for diversity supplement. For diversity supplements, I would recommend as soon as you if you're thinking about it, as soon as you have that NOA in hand, go ahead and submit. Because one of the details that I wasn't able to cover because it's very detailed, but one of the details for being eligible for the diversity supplement is that we can't fund you in a no-cost extension. So let's say your NOA starts January 1st, right? And your project end date is December 31st, 2023. We can't fund you past that point. And for the diversity supplement, you have to have at least 6 months remaining from the start of the supplement period. So it would take, you would have to start your application at least 8 months prior to the end date of the award. Or else there's kind of really no point because that candidate really isn't going to benefit from working on your grant less than 6 months. Yeah. So if you have an idea in mind, I would say submit your supplement immediately.
And if you have a candidate already working in your institute or your place that you're working at, can you add them on to this, or do you have to recruit a new person?
No, it doesn't have to be a new person. It can be somebody who's already working with you or in your lab or in your company, but the only stipulation is that they can't have any current federal funding. So if they were on your parent award, you can't just take them off and use this as supplemental funding to kind of transfer them over. You can't do that.
Okay, great. I think we could take one last question. Are we good, or do we have any further questions? Okay.
Thank you. Does the NIA have any programs similar to the Catalyze program for companies that don't quite fit the SBIR definition anymore?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. For the what program?
One of the other groups talked about the Catalyze program, which isn't strictly the SBIR rules.
I'm actually not aware of what the Catalogs program is.
Oh. Well, do you have any programs that are for groups that do not quite fit the SBIR definition?
Well, we have like research awards, but if they're going to be, we can only give to small businesses.
We are a small business. It's just our cap table isn't majority owned by either individuals or.
Got it. Then in that case, no, we don't.
Okay. Thank you.